Everybody likes a good story. Better yet, everybody likes it when a good storyteller tells that story. And in the Homeric fashion, the Bible was first an oral story. So I'm going to share with you all a story that you likely know, but this time don't analyze it, just listen. Joshua was ready. The angel had given him God's command. All that was left was to enact it. The city was already terrified of the Israelites, for their reputation preceded them. They had conquered many cities in the land of Canaan, and Jericho would likely not be the last. Joshua's spies had gone in beforehand, and though Jericho was heavily fortified, with walls surrounding the entire city, it would be an easy victory, for Joshua had faith in God. Joshua, 7 priests, the Israelites, and the Ark of the Covenant marched around the city each day. Not one word was spoken by the entire group of Israelites. No children cried, no people complained of sore feet, no command was given by Joshua. And they did this for 7 days, on the 7th day marching around the city 7 times, with the priests blowing their trumpets each time. 7's the magic number here. On Joshua's command, the Israelites gave a great and mighty shout, and miraculously, unbelievably, the walls of the city came tumbling down to the ground. Joshua instructed that all the precious metals, valuables be given for the glory of God. Anything sullied with the adulation of another god was not to be touched. Everything in the city was destroyed, save Rahab the prostitute, along with her family who helped Joshua's spies. All the men, women, and children were killed as well. Joshua declared that whoever rebuilt the city would lose their firstborn, and whoever built the wall up again, their youngest. And side note, the city has obviously been rebuilt. This story is known by everyone, young and old. A story of how faith can move mountains, or in this case, tear down walls. It is symbolic of victory through God and the promise made to Abraham of a land of milk and honey. But to delve deeper into the story, we must acknowledge that it's riddled with theological flaws. Robert B. Coote says, "There is probably nothing more offensive to modern sensibilities than God's sanction of genocide against the Canaanites. The biggest issue in this passage lies in the fact that God allowed, condoned, and even enforced the killing of an entire people for what? To gain some perspective, you'll have to sit through a bit of a history lesson. As you hopefully know, Moses freed the Israelites from Egypt, and post-liberation, they trekked through the desert on their way to the land of milk and honey. To shorten the story, the Israelites were pretty stupid, and many of them died. Moses was even denied entrance to the land due to his unfaithfulness. And after Moses died, the new leader became Joshua. Pause, take a step back. In the time that they had been trekking, the Israelites crossed many countries, but first they asked for permission to trek through. Most of these countries, seeing the Israelites, a displaced group of people on the run from who knows what, decided that the safest course of action would be to attack them, either to scare them away or to kill them. The Middle East was, and continues to be, a place of turmoil, so it's safe to assume that this was a normal, even reasonable reaction from any country. But when the Israelites were attacked, God granted them protection. This became true for every hostile country that would attack the Israelites when they tried to pass through, which were many. Keep in mind, although the Israelites were in essence wiping out these nations, they did it purely defensively, only attacking when first prompted by the other side. They were displaced people searching for a land in which they could re-erect their culture and start over. But the rules changed when they reached Canaan. Moses had left one final message for Joshua from God. He was to drive out all the people in the country of Canaan and to destroy all the idols and worship sites. Otherwise, the land would be sullied and unfit for the glory of God. And so the conquest of Canaan began, and Jericho was first on the list. There are several different theological reasons one can interpret why God sanctioned the genocide in Jericho. Perhaps because the people of Jericho were wicked as they worshipped other gods and their hearts were hard. Therefore, God had to kill them to preserve his reign. But this was true not just for the residents of Jericho, but for all those in the land of Canaan. And as for the Israelites, it is made abundantly clear that they were not a completely moral, devout, and righteous society like sometimes portrayed. These people complained, whined, and questioned God at every corner. The key difference was that eventually, and I mean like way in the distant horizon eventually, they followed God's command. Those who did not were, through various processes, weeded out during the Israelites' trek through Egypt. So these people were, in conclusion, God's chosen people merely because they were less wicked than the others. And it would be a grave assumption to assume that God sanctioned the genocide of a people for their supposed wickedness, acknowledging that the Israelites really weren't much better. Next, we can look at the cultural reasoning. Robert B. Coote also says, Jericho, which lay about 4 miles west of the Jordan, was the prime urban settlement beside the Jordan where it flows closest to Jerusalem in the highland. Thus, Jericho helped mark the boundary of a land to be conquered under Joshua. Jericho also dominated the route south to the rest of the western side of the Dead Sea Basin. Here was concentrated the increased production of incense in Palestine. There was, evidently, no lack of strategic advantage to laying siege to the city of Jericho. And it was a siege. By the time that the Israelites had reached Jericho, news had already spread fast about the Israelites and their army of unbeatable power. Their reputation preceded them, and the citizens of Jericho were terrified of God's unbeatable army. And then, as the people marched around the city on the 7th day, something amazing happened to the city of Jericho. Something, well, almost unbelievable. Modern science has given us the tool of archaeology to unearth the past, which we have, and we find something surprising. What we have unearthed has showed us something almost unbelievable in itself, that the traditional conquest model of Canaan probably didn't happen. It could likely be like this sermon, a narrative. Remember, the Bible was originally passed down orally, and who doesn't like a good story? The story of Joshua's beliefs, literally knocking down walls as tall as cities without laying so much as a finger on it? This extravagant story would likely hold listeners rapt with attention, making believers out of the hardest cut of skeptics. So, is it a bad thing that the story could be just that? A story? Fictitious as the Harry Potter novels themselves? Definitely not. There is still much to be learned from this passage, to be questioned, mulled over, to doubt. James Barr asks, can we accept the divine sanction of genocide and remain moral at the same time? My guess would be probably not. Do we have to? Also probably not. Many more historians and theologians, infinitely more qualified than I, can give explanation upon explanation as to why God would allow the murder of a people and the significance of this mandate. Did God himself sanction this? If so, why? Does this mean that God is wrong, or is my religion wrong? Did this even happen? If it didn't happen, but it's still in the Bible, what can I learn from this? Is there something to learn from this? To the last question, of course. In the movie, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?, 3 runaway prisoners, Everett, Pete, and Delmar, go on an epic journey that runs parallel to the Odyssey. The goal of the trip, retrieve the $1.2 million treasure Everett claims to have stolen and buried before being arrested, a treasure that turns out to be entirely fictitious. Along the way, the runaways encounter varying situations, each one more comic than the last. One of the funniest scenes has to be when the 3 travelers happen upon a baptism. Delmar is the first to rush into the water, shoving others aside in his desperation to be baptized. Pete follows shortly after, believing Delmar's claim that he will be absolved of all sin. For the next 40 or so minutes of the movie, Pete and Delmar are men of God. And despite the fact that neither had the faintest idea what the baptism actually entailed, they believed wholeheartedly that they were clean and their sins were absolved. And while this speaks a great deal about their faith, I don't believe it speaks highly of their character. Their faith, while fervent, is in the moment. There was no thought, no consideration behind their decision. They wished to reap the rewards of their crop without actually planting seeds. They literally, and yes, this is the proper employment of the term, rushed into things without thinking about the consequences, or really anything for that matter. In order to have a strong faith, we must ask questions, hard questions, questions that you have no answer for, questions that you will find no answer for, questions that you may never get an answer for. You are a teacher, and one of your students, a young boy no older than 10, is obviously not getting enough to eat at home. The act of you telling anyone about this will most certainly lead him into a group home where he may come out more scarred than if you had just let him be. If you send food home with him, you risk losing your job. What do you decide to do? You are a young woman walking alone at night, and as you reach a parking lot where your car is parked, an unfamiliar man approaches asking if you could help him jumpstart your car. In today's society, do you help him? You see a young man on the news who shot and killed 9 people at a church that welcomed him into their Bible study and sat with him for over an hour. Would you still invite this man to eat dinner with you just as Jesus would? Life is not black and white, and neither are real-life questions that are applicable to us as modern Christians. Neither is the Bible. When Joshua looked back upon the city, he did not cheer and holler for joy. Likely, with head hung in sorrow, he cursed the very soil and would attempt to rebuild the city. While we don't know why some things in the Bible pan out the way they do, maybe consider for a moment that the people in the Bible didn't either. Joshua, Moses, Noah, Abraham, David, Hagar, Rahab, Mary, and many more were all forced into tough situations where they could do nothing but have faith in God. But don't you think maybe they asked questions too? And do you honestly think they had all the answers? Questioning what you know will test your faith. Questioning what you don't know will pull at the very fabric of it. These questions will cause you to doubt. They will lead you down the road less traveled. These questions will define your faith, and they will make your faith strong. Because when we don't ask hard questions, we are selling ourselves short of the knowledge and wisdom that we can gain by questioning. Because sometimes other people can be wrong, and a lot of the time you can be wrong. So leave your preconceived notions at the door, because there is no place for them in God's kingdom. And because faith shouldn't be easy. Amen.